Testing my volume. Can you hear me through the microphones? Am I coming through the mics?
Let's try this one. Is that working? I think it's working. Is that working?
I think so. I think I hear it.
A little bit closer.
Sound booth, are you hearing both of us?
Hello. Mine needs to be closer.
You can hear me? There we go.
How's that?
That sounds like you're on.
I can hold it. I can hold it if need be. You think I put it there? Okay, I'll try. Bowden. Do you know Bowden? Boden. Their sales are great, and most of their dresses have pockets. And they make dresses for tall people and short people.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have tall and petite, and almost all their dresses have pockets. But I will say, you'll get sticker shock if you don't just go straight to the sales section.
There was a great article in the Atlantic about the woman who first designed pockets into dresses. Did you see this? It was a couple months ago. About
Yes,
how
pockets are
innovative
essential.
she was. She's like, you know what? We're going to need functional.
We're going to need function. Yes.
This little conversation about fashion is helping us test our sound system. So it's a double win. Thank you. We doing okay? Okay. Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm going to take a page out of the old Dave Letterman setup and say my guest today needs no introduction. I'm going to give her a short one anyway. It's been a real gift for me and for all of us, I know, to be part of this weekend and to be present for Dr. Amy Laura Hall's conversations, addresses on St. Julian. We're going to have a conversation now that's going to build on some of that. If you weren't here for the earlier talks, you won't be missing anything. There weren't prerequisites for this. We're going to be digging into a little bit more deeply into some of her scholarship about Dame Julian. But just first, a little bit about Dr. Hall. She's an ordained, I don't know if we've said this, maybe you've said this, but an ordained elder in the United Methodist Church. Along with the author of the book we've been talking about, Laughing at the Devil, she's also working on co-editing a Cambridge companion to Julian of Norwich. The Cambridge companions are guides put out by Cambridge University Press, gathering the best scholars on a particular theme or a particular person, particular period of history, and essays that are great introductions to the scholarship. So it becomes like your one-volume introduction. If I'm going to start studying this thing, what do I need to know? And they find some of the most capable researchers to not only participate in those, but to edit those. And so Dr. Hall has been asked to be the editor of the forthcoming Cambridge companion to Lady Julian. If that's not enough of a sort of a note for you about the kind of scholar that we get to have been with this weekend and we get to be with today, then I don't know what to tell you, because that's a big deal. I have I've followed Dr. Hall's career since it started. She started at Duke University when as a professor of ethics there. When I sort of began my theological journey down the road at University of Virginia, the very same year, same fall, I think we went. And in fact, our schools had a consortial relationship for a while. We were driving to religion departments. We're driving to one another's places and getting to know one another. So I got to hear about the exciting new ethics professor that they'd hired down the road at Duke. Told a story on myself a few nights ago, but we don't have to go back to that story about some of that. But all of that to say, it's been a gift to have you here, and I've been really excited about our conversation that we get to have, where we can dig a little bit more into your work on Julian. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for the hospitality. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. If the conversation is a total bomb, at least we've already gotten some applause.
That's true.
So that's a good start. One of the things that I began to appreciate more about your title as I read the book, Laughing at the Devil, subtitle, Seeing the World with Julian of Norwich. And you told us that, and you also described some in the book, that you began all this research, you were teaching Julian, you even produced a volume on Julian, a piece of work on Julian, and then you had to go back and realize that in order to do this with the integrity and honesty of where you were in your life at that moment, you had to redo it. And that seeing the world with, is something that I really encountered that subtitle in a new way, because what you do is you tell your own story. You tell about the world that you're seeing, and then you'll tell about Julian, and when you come to a real stumper of something Julian said, you step back and say how you experienced this as a person who was teaching and a single mom and living and cleaning up messes that dogs and children left, various places. Julian became sort of seeing that world with Julian. Became one of the ways that you were engaging with her work, and that's one of the things I really appreciate about the way that you give Julian to us in this work.
Thank you.
I want to point us to a passage. This is a setup to my first question, which is, you talked to us a little bit about what got you started with Julian. Did I just lose Mike? No, I still got it. What got you started with Julian? I want to ask, what keeps you coming back to Julian? So here's a passage I want to read. We've been talking a lot about blood. We're gonna head right into a little bit of graphic description here about the painful world that she inhabited and that she can help us inhabit. So Scripture says, not only will the lion, okay, I've got to back up a bit before we go right there. We will both be different and individual and awkwardly together someday in heaven. Scripture says, not only will the lion barf up the lamb, but each lion and lamb will be friends in heaven. And then she begins to wonder, how do we actually make sense of that in a world that's got filled with deep suffering from our news feed and from our lives that we inhabit? The swirl of dismembered body parts is an airline disaster. That is an airline disaster or genocide, or a village ravaged by a tiger is not beyond God. I find this both confusing and desperately compelling. The vision of the last days, when each of us will be at a heavenly banquet with God, is not what I would call reassurance. The word reassurance seems wrong. Reassurance in the middle of misery is invasive, like a commercial break for bubble bath in the middle of a documentary about the trench warfare of World War I. Unless you have a thick and enduringly lizard-like skin, reckoning with suffering while saying, God will provide, seems either stupid or cruel or under the influence of deadening pharmaceuticals. Watching people rage and weep over the nonsense, and that's a technical theological word for a reader of Julian. Watching people rage and weep over the nonsense that is a tragic or effectively manipulated loss still renders me speechless. But turning again to Julian's visions has helped me think about what it means that I am still arguing and hoping that what Julian saw is true. I want someday to laugh at the devil and at the carnival that is all of us being barfed up individually, remembered by God, and celebrating together. You keep coming back to Julian in hopes that she can that wrestling with her vision will bring you back to that vision in the real world, in the life that we live in a new way. Mm-hmm. Talk to us a little bit about that. As a teacher, as a scholar, what keeps you coming back?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, just in case anybody doesn't know, but I came to Julian in 1999 because my syllabus had no women on it. I was about to teach a class, an Introduction to Christian Ethics, for the first time at Duke, and I didn't have a woman on the syllabus. And somebody said to me, add Julian of Norwich, you know her. She said, all shall be well, all manner of things shall be well. And I said, no, I've never heard of her, and she sounds stupid. And So I started reading her, I think the Spearing translation, which by the way I highly recommend. It's the Penguin edition. It's small. It's not much bigger than my book. It's small. You can read both of her texts in a small volume in translation from the Middle English. And I think it had come out maybe the year before. I was trying to remember. And also a book by Frederick Bauerschmidt. Do you know Fritz? So Fritz Bauerschmidt, everybody calls him Fritz, who's a Catholic scholar. He had done his PhD at Duke. I believe his PhD is from Duke. Yes, right, yeah. Yes. He had done his PhD on Julian of Norwich. I read his dissertation on Julian of Norwich alongside the translation, and that made all the difference because I was able to read about her context, and that made her words salient in a different way, for sure, than if I hadn't known more about that region of England and crises that were going on. So one of the simple answers about why I continue to turn to Julian is because I find it a challenge, an interesting challenge, to think through the layers of what she's seen and how they fit together or contrast with one another. I published three more academically focused articles on Julian before I published this book with Duke Press, and there were puzzles. I had puzzles that I still want to write about and think about in her text, one being the Sermon in the Lord text. I just find it fascinating, and thinking about what it means that she saw this vision, did not write about it in the short text, but thought about it for so long. So that's one of the reasons, is because I find her intellectually stimulating. I find her texts interesting. I'm curious about how they work together, how her visions work. And it's also the case that there's something of a renaissance, I think it's fair to say, in Julian studies. It's partly due, I'll be just really blunt here, it's partly due to the fact that some men in theology started taking her more seriously. There's a man named Dennis Turner at Yale, who's from Great Britain, but he wrote a book arguing for Julian as a systematic theologian, and that made a difference. It made a difference. It kind of gave a Yale male imprimatur on her.
That's real.
That's
real.
I think that's fair to say. Yeah. And so I've had more men asking to take a seminar on Julian. It used to be so difficult. The Penguin edition has a painting, not of Julian, but we don't have any paintings of Julian. But it has a painting of a woman in a head covering in a way that connotes a woman religious to most Protestant viewers who don't know anything about her.
She looks like a flying nun.
She looks like a flying nun. Yeah, she looks. Thank you. She looks like a flying nun. And so it has been hard over the years to convince your average Duke Divinity student to even bother reading her words. And that's changing. So it gives me more opportunities.
Yeah. Picking up on sort of wrestling with the hard parts of Julian that continue to be intellectually stimulating. that's one of the things that I'm imagining the Cambridge Companion that you're beginning to work on, that you're working on now, is doing. I'm imagining a sort of shift from this book where you are engaging with her and you're seeing the world with her to something that's more sort of in the lines of sort of the idea of scholarship, or the idea of sort of peer-reviewed scholarship that's digging deeply into the sources. And
here's one of the interesting things that we were just corresponding about this through email. So my co-editor is a woman named Ayush Lazakani. She is a medievalist Islamicist. She works on medieval Islamic texts, and I highly recommend. I'll send you a note that y'all can.
Please, yeah.
She wrote a beautiful, very accessible essay on. She calls it "The Avian Imagination," about how concepts like the moon, which is not just a concept, it's a concrete, how the moon functions in different parts of Europe among different peoples who didn't necessarily know one another, but she thinks of that in terms of like thinking as a bird would think, flying over, seeing the moon and hearing words and reading words about the moon. So working with Ayush has just been such a gift. We go online to visit with each other about this volume and who the contributors will be. We have 15 of 15 contributors committed from across different specialties. So literature professors, professors of visual studies, historians. And here is one of the chapters one of the chapters that was already set that Cambridge University Press wanted to make sure we had they asked us to consider having a chapter on Julian and Judaism. And I'm going to tell a story on myself. I've taught her text so many times and written on her for multiple different venues and such. And so as Ayush and I were visiting about that section, I said to her, I was like, I'm really embarrassed to say, I don't remember, what did Julian say about Jewish people? Did she say something, was it particularly? And Ayush is so sweet, and she said, well, I think it's in this one section of it, and so I pull out my Penguin edition and I read it. And it's everyone, basically, it's everyone will be saved except the Jews. Everyone will be saved except the Jews. And I had at Chautauqua, I think, when I spoke at the Chautauqua Institute, and then at the Virginia Festival of the Book. I know at the Virginia Festival of the Book, one of the people who came to hear me talk about the book asked me a question: how do you understand her universalism given her exclusion of the Jews and the expulsion of Jewish people in England in 1290? So before her, she's writing her texts. And I didn't have an answer at that time when at the Virginia Festival when somebody asked it. I said, I need to learn more about that. I'm writing the chapter on sin and salvation. I believe that's the chapter. Yeah. I'm writing the chapter on sin and salvation, and that is a question I'm going to look at throughout her texts. Is what other ways does she give caveats about who will be saved, and how to think about that statement at that time, because I don't think it's fair to say she was a woman of her time, because there are lots of ways in which she is groundbreaking. Right. So part of what I'm learning right now is the contours that pretty much anybody who knows Western history knows that it's not as if Nazi Germany was sprouted out of nowhere. It's the Christendom is a long story in Western Europe and Eastern Europe of horrific, deadly anti-Semitism. But I'm learning the contours of those stories in England and specifically the area of England that she lived in. And then we'll have another chapter on Julian and Judaism that a Jewish scholar is contributing. So that is one of my. I'm finally committing to do what I said I would do at the Virginia Festival of the Book when a Jewish participant asked me that question.
I love the fact that just as a scholar with integrity, you want to say, let's celebrate the ways in which Julian was insightful and courageous in ways that nobody else around her was, but let's not let her off the hook for the ways in which she was repeating some of the same prejudices that people around her were repeating. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm reading Jewish scholars of this period in England noting how it was that Jewish people before 1290 were used by different monarchs for their handling of money and handling of riches,
right.
And also how during this period in the theological texts, they're meant to still be around as object lessons of why Christianity is triumphant because of their refusal of Jesus Christ's lordship. So I'm going to be thinking about that alongside her. That's pretty heavy stuff, but it's important. I think it's important to note because I honestly had just, when I read that when Ayush was like, I think it's right here, and then I read it, I was like, that's not even subtle.
Yeah.
That's not even like using a character from the Hebrew Bible in a way it's like,
Yeah, and it's wild. It strikes me that's whatever you turn up in this in this research, something so strange has happened in Christianity at that point. If like one of the clearest things that you get from Paul in Romans is, however else we're making sense of the blood of Christ, the one thing that I have hope for is that all Israel will be saved. Just explicitly says that. And then for Julian, who's helping us think in brand new ways about the blood of Christ and the way that it embraces all, can leave that exception. Embraces all, but
not the Jews.
But not the Jews.
So I'm gonna be a little bit nerdy again in terms of scholarship and tell y'all that one of the things that I'm going to be thinking about also is we talked about this earlier about a session on radical orthodoxy, which is a whole story, and I'll let y'all visit about that another time.
You're going to talk about my people now.
Talk about your people. Talk about your people. Radical orthodoxy. So there was a session at the American Academy of Religion with some of the key senior figures in a school of thought that they themselves call radical orthodoxy, and in this form of are most of the scholars Anglican? Church of England are most of the scholars?
At the beginning especially they were.
Okay, so at this session with senior scholars who are in this school of thought, years and years ago, a Jewish philosopher named Edith Visegrad was a respondent to the key speakers within radical orthodoxy. Radical orthodoxy being very specifically Christian, very specifically, unapologetically, very clearly Christian set of conversations that I find fascinating. And her statement, her response was so sparse that I can give you the gist of it. It was more beautifully, she worded it, maybe beautiful is the wrong word, it was sparse. Here is what she said. She was addressing a man named John Milbank, who's still teaching, I believe. He's
retired.
Is he retired? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, he teaches, or he's in England now. So she said to him, John Milbank, she said, I have no doubt that you have the intellectual power to configure or define everything that is, every field that is, because that is part of the task, every field that is mathematics, science, I have no doubt that you have the intellectual power to explain all that is within the mass. All I can do is ask you not to compel me to the table. That will be something else I'm going to be writing about, is thinking about different ways that Julian's universalism could be sort of mechanized, utilized to describe all that is, such that it is a kind of compelling to the table.
Ooh, yeah. We should probably not here and now, but we should talk about the Merchant of Venice sometime.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's talk about that sometime. Let's make a note.
Eventually, I want to write on Kierkegaard's use of Shakespeare. My first book was on a dead Danish philosopher named Søren Kierkegaard, and eventually I want to write on Kierkegaard and Shakespeare. Yeah.
Okay, so I have several more things I'd like to ask you about. I'd also like to invite you you ought to be thinking about things that you'd like to shout out to ask as well. But maybe first, just so along with exploring more about that fascinating topic, about the strange overlap of universalism and her treatment of the Jews, are there other things that you feel like the world needs to explore more deeply about Julian, that maybe this text will be a way of introducing or deepening a conversation?
Sure. So I just completed a manuscript for Bloomsbury Press on muscular Christianity. Should I tell them the title?
I think, I'll let you discern that. I didn't say it out loud when I introduced you the other night, but I now put it in your hands.
So it's there. I mean, it's going to be on the cover. The title is Erecting the Pulpit: Muscular Christianity from Teddy Roosevelt to Donald Trump.
So I just said she's writing a book on muscular Christianity and left it,
So I've been working on this book for so long, and I've been working on the book for so long, and I finally finished it, and then broke my right wrist, and then heard from the publisher that it was 100,000 words too long. So it was a 200,000 word book, and the publisher was like, "You need to cut it 100,000 words." At first he said 50,000 words, and then he said 100,000 words.
So are we losing Roosevelt or are we losing Trump?
We're not. We're not. But here's one thing we're losing. He just said, "I don't think you need this part," but I do. I'll end up talking about the part whenever somebody wants me to talk about the book. There was a section at the very beginning of the book about my own understanding of Jesus. And it's meant for a very general readership. So people who have no idea about anything related to mainstream evangelicalism, who do not even know we have a national cathedral, that the Episcopalians have national. Anyway, that's a whole conversation between a Methodist and Episcopalian that we'll just not have right now. But
keep talking about my people.
So I had this one very short section, but I told a story about how I was teaching Julian at the time, and to a class on the love commandment, and I was explaining that every single bit of us will be redeemed, that all of us will be redeemed, and every single thing about us will be redeemed. And I said that it's very hard to think about time in such a way that we're not thinking about our bodies, our lives, as progressing towards some success, but instead to think of our lives, our bodies, as held and beloved by God, as not instrumental, but as unqualifiedly good and beloved by God. And as I was talking about this, some of the students were just like, what exactly do you mean that matters for how we think about our bodies in time? And one of the students, Brandon Melton, in the back, he said, "Jesus reattached the ear." And I
Oh
was
yeah,
like,
that's good. That's good.
yeah.
That's good.
And so in this part of Luke's gospel, where lots of big things are happening as far as Christians as we're reading it, Jesus is going off to be crucified. And in the midst of this, you have Malchus, who ends up with his ear reattached. And that's what, in the book, the part of the book that I just finished that isn't going to be in the book, but hopefully the strand runs all the way through it. That is a strand that runs throughout my entire scholarship, is that our ears matter, his ear mattered, that Jesus took time to reattach the ear, his ear, not just somebody's ear, his ear. Yeah. And that any form of Christianity that counts that ear as not mattering and just steps on the ear and moves on to the bigger things, the bigger story. Any form of masculinity and Christianity intertwined that does that, I'm calling out as the real problem with masculinity and Christianity in America. Yeah. So, and that takes in a lot. It takes in Teddy Roosevelt as well as Donald Trump. So it's going to be a controversial book. But Julian, when I found out that Cambridge Press wanted me to co-edit this with Ayush, I just thought, oh, thank God, because I really am going to need a big old bunch of doses of Julian after finishing that research, that scholarship, that work.
And that may say something about what you were saying earlier about why there's a renaissance in Julian studies now. Noticing that it's not just about, hey, how do I get a woman on this syllabus?
Yes.
But like noticing there's something, there's some medicine in her that we're missing.
There's some medicine, yes, there's some medicine. Yeah, yeah, very much. Yeah, that's true, that's true.
Yeah, there we go, Kevin. Shout it out and I'll say it into the mics.
I hate that I'm even thinking along these lines, but it wasn't that long ago that we started talking about DEI as such a wonderful thing because we were bringing in inclusionary ideas, and I'm hearing about a renaissance of Julia. I'm just learning in the first place, but is there any danger that she and female scholarship in the church is going to be marginalized because didn't earn it, DEI, that she's going to be somehow looked upon as having been brought in for the wrong reasons or re-analyzed for the wrong reasons and therefore marginalized for the wrong reasons. Is that even a possibility?
So the question is there a risk more people turn to Julian, is there a risk that she'll be dismissed as being brought in under sort of a DEI philosophy?
Oh, absolutely. So I would say, is this going to be broadcast? Okay.
Yep, sure is.
I'll put this in more general terms. So funding, here's something really basic. I mean, this is in the New York Times. Here's something really basic. Okay, y'all know that the Episcopal Church was torn asunder, right?
We do.
You know the Methodist Church has been torn asunder.
Yeah.
I mean, we already kind of tore ourselves a little bit in Wesleyan, circles, going way back, arguing about things. Do you know one of the giant funding things that made all that happen? The split in the Lutheran Church, the Presbyterian Church, the Episcopal Church, the Methodist Church. Do y'all know? Look up the Institute on Religion and Democracy. So the Institute on Religion and Democracy was funded by very, very, very wealthy people, some of whom are Roman Catholic, which when I found that out, that was confusing to me. Why bother with us? But you can look up, if you look up Institute on Religion and Democracy, and you can find a lot. But
they actually funded my dissertation fellowship.
Did they really?
They really did, yeah.
The
you keep talking about my people.
Did they really? Really?
Yeah.
Now that's interesting, not because I'm judging you. I find it.
I would have taken a fellowship from anyone.
Listen, I've called for a boycott of some foundations, but in part because like I just want people to think critically,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
if they're like, you must write this way, then you can say like, okay, and then you take the money and run.
Yeah, yeah,
so I
yeah.
hope you took the money and ran.
I took the money and ran.
So, yeah, you're here. So, but that's interesting. It's interesting to me that they would fund dissertation fellowships. So the answer to your question is, this has been going on for a while. And some of the same people, donors, who've been donating to the Institute on Religion and Democracy, because their job is kind of done. They've now split us in, all the mainstream denominations. But some of those same people are funding chairs in theology at places, key schools in England, key schools here. I do write about that some in the Muscular Christianity book.
We're talking about James Davison Hunter's people, right?
Oh, absolutely. The McDonald Foundation, which has a big ethics center at Oxford. I mean, big money going into what happened at Oxford was that they ended up with a whole national conversation about how good colonialism was. So, yeah, and I'm not exaggerating at all. You can look up Nigel Bigger, and you can look up who's now taken up that chair at Oxford. But these are major donors who want to rescue Christendom, and also change the world is the title of James Davison Hunter's book on this. James Davison Hunter also, the Wall Street Journal credits him as being the one who came up with the term culture wars.
That's right.
So when you see, he made a diagnosis that then became kind of also a prescription for dividing people politically. And he's an evangelical sociologist. So he's an evangelical sociologist. And those strands of funding are shaping theological education across the country and also in England. But in my experience, to some extent they're winning when it comes to who gets big posts and power. But to some extent they're not winning, because you would have to homeschool all the children, send them to Christian colleges that prohibit any kind of conversation, and so funnel them and try to control their brains, which is part of the goal, right, in some of these circles. But you would have to work so hard to keep this next generation from being more quote unquote woke, because they are, and you can't put all that back. They're not going to win. But at this point, the way one evangelical man put it to me, he said it's going to be bad. He was referring to the Tolkien stories, and I didn't know what he was talking about. He said it's going to be like the Battle of La La La, and I was like, huh? And he said they're going to be throwing everything in their arsenal at this tide of the browning of the world, right? The white people are going to be in the minority, and what's the problem with that? But they have a big problem with that, right? And also the feminization of Western culture, that we become more feminized. So the way this man put it is, he said they're going to be throwing everything. And one of the ways, because laughter is crucial to me, that I think of this is I think the bullies are going to be throwing everything at us to cow us, including cows, which is a reference to Monty Python.
Yeah, you are. Somebody was talking there.
Instead of thinking, yeah, so they'll be, There'll be the bunnies with the teeth.
Yeah,
There'll be the
yeah.
vorpal bunnies and the cows.
Cows and catapults.
You just kind of, so I have to think that way because otherwise I'll feel cowed. So I'll just think of a cow coming over the wall.
Okay, with no segue, because we're almost out of time, I'm going to ask you one final question, and you can decide if it's on the same subject or departing.
Okay.
What do we need as St. Julian's Church? What do you hope that St. Julian can give us that we can sort of take on as part of our prayer life, as part of our identity? How can St. Julian live with us in a deeper way?
Oh, I trust y'all to come up with that. I really do. What a wonderful time it's been to be with y'all. I'll give you one thing I didn't end up saying in my 2 days was an image of the heavenly banquet that I have had in my mind for about a month because I watched the new season of King of the Hill. Have y'all seen the new season of King of the Hill? It really is so dear. Oh my gosh, there's a book burning episode that you don't want to miss. It's just, I love that show so much. But there is, in the first episode, I don't think I'm going to ruin it too much. In the first episode, Peggy and Hank are trying to decide whether they're going to go back to Saudi Arabia, as they say, and or they're going to stay in Texas, but Texas has just changed so much, and they're complaining about and they're walking into the Megalomart, and there are some girls selling Girl Scout cookies, and they're explaining why the Samoas are no longer calling they're no longer called Samoas, and you can see Hank is kind of like, he's like, well, I guess that's kind of a good change. And then a man, I'm going to tear up because I just started crying, and I'm like, oh, it's so sweet. This man walks up with a tool, and Hank says, like, what kind of tool is that? Well, it's this kind, and I've been needing something like that. And the man looks Hispanic. I'll go ahead and just say that. And so there's this little heavenly banquet in front of the Megalomart with Girl Scout cookies, and I just thought the Holy Spirit shows up at the Megalomart. And I'll tell you something, one other quick thing, and because this is the first thing that came to my mind when you asked me that. I walked out of the HEB at Leander. It was on Sunday. Yeah, it was last Sunday. Because I was with my parents who live in Cedar Park, and I usually drive out to the HEB in Leander for all sorts of reasons. I love the HEB right by their house, but I also drive out to the big one in Leander. And as I came out, there was teenagers holding a sign saying free prayer. And my first thought was like, oh, those kind of Christians. Yeah. Sorry. That was my first thought. And then there was a woman who, I won't give all the details, but I'd seen her in the store, and I mean, the look of relief when she saw that there were some kids willing to pray with her. And she stopped. And somebody else who was with her, who was clearly not happy she stopped, was kind of like, and I appeased to the other person. But, you know, what would it look like for y'all to do your version of whatever that is, which it sounds like trunk or treat, maybe part of that, but just like be dorky, those kind of Christians in public ways that can be the Holy Spirit showing up at the Megalomart.
We can be dorky Christians in public. We can do that. Thank you so much for being here with us this weekend. Thank you.